Let's rank every single champion from easiest to hardest. We'll go roll by roll and have 4 different difficulty tiers. The champions will be placed in either easy, medium, hard, or expert. But before we get into it, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on all our new content. Moving on to what the tiers mean. Easy tier will be more specifically consisting of champions that should only take you around 0 to 10 games to start having an impact. Medium tier champions will take you a bit longer with at least 10 to 25 games needed. The hard tier will require you to play 25 to 50 games before you should expect consistent results. And lastly, for the expert tier, 50 games or more will be required for you to really be a force on the champion. All right, so let's start off in the solo lane and then make our way down the map. The easy tier for solo lane consists of champions that you can be impactful with from the moment you pick them up. At the very most, you'll need 10 games on these picks to get some of the mechanics down, but you won't have to commit a ton of time. Most of these champions have very elementary mechanics and have tools in their kits that are extremely powerful but don't require much skill to use. Take Greystone, for example. He's one of the best solo lane champions because no matter how terrible your matchup knowledge is, you have the ability to use a second life. And when you feel uncomfortable, you can reposition yourself with a leap. This, paired with an AoE damage ability, allows you to know when to fight and when not to. The medium tier for top lane is sprinkled with champions that are still relatively easy to pick up, but usually have one unique part to their kit that will require you to spend a bit more time to get the hang of. Sevrog, for example. Pretty simple champion for the most part, but his passive is such a unique mechanic you don't see on any other champion. Really being able to get the most out of his passive is vital in your success with Sevrog, and 10 games may not quite be enough to really get it down, but 25 games should be enough, though that is why we have Sevrog as a nice fit in the medium tier. Taking a look at the hard tier for solo lane, you're going to need to commit a considerable amount of games to them if you want to see the best results. For a lot of these champions, it either comes down to them having very intricate kits or being more heavily reliant on landing skill shots to be effective. Crunch is a bit of both as his kit relies on skill combinations. It's not realistic for the average player to pick up Crunch and expect to see results right away. 25 to 50 games is a good benchmark for this champion. That's about what you should expect to put in before you really start feeling comfortable. Expert. Quick note, one thing that helped us with ranking champions was asking ourselves the question, how would I feel if my teammate were to first time this champion in my game? We'll refer to this as the first time test throughout the video. But for someone like Greystone, who we have in the easy tier, the answer was simple. I don't care. Now, let's switch that with a champion in the expert tier. I would never, and I mean never, feel comfortable seeing my teammate first time an expert tier champion in my game. I know that's a loss. The skill floor is extremely high for these expert tier champions because they're more mechanically intensive, while also being feast or famine champs, requiring being even or staying ahead. Most offer very little utility for their team to really get the most out of these champions and to play them at a level to where there are more worth from them than champions in the tiers below them. You should expect to play at least 50 games. An example of this would be Kalari or Shinbi in the solo lane. For jungle, the easy tier consists of champions that have more linear kits and don't require any advanced mechanical skill to be impactful. These champions are going to be the best for you to pick up if you're looking to learn the role, because being able to focus solely on your play will make you a better jungler as a whole much faster. Chimera is the perfect example of an easy jungler because his combos are very simple and the brunt of his damage comes from auto-attacking and using his jump to secure kills, which is probably the most difficult part about him. But even then, it's not going to take you more than a few games to nail it down. A lot of the champions in the medium tier for the jungle may not be that much more difficult than the easy tier mechanically speaking, but the decision making required to play them is generally a bit higher. Take Steel, for example. Pretty simple champion on the mechanical front. His main damage source is from a handful of AoE-esque abilities that in theory shouldn't be too difficult to land. The difference between someone like Steel and Chimera, though, is that Steel has less margin for error due to the skill-oriented crowd control being a little bit more difficult to land. It's also important to know how much damage he's going to deal at a certain item spike, so that when you dive in, you can be certain you're going to assassinate your target. So even though for some of these champions, they're in the medium tier due to them having more mechanical skill than the easy tier champs, the game knowledge required to play them is a big factor for many as well. For the jungle hard tier, you'll notice that many of these champions have very unique kits. For example, even if you're a jungle main, picking up someone like Shinbi for the first time is going to be way more difficult than picking up someone like Kai. Shinbi's kit is just so different than anything else we see due to her being a caster. She's one of the more difficult junglers to learn because of a combination of her abilities and playstyle. And to get the most out of her for the average player, at least 25 games will be needed with these hard tier junglers before you can expect to see consistent results. Expert tier for jungle consists of champions that are incredibly reliant on impeccable mechanical prowess in order to out-impact junglers in the tiers below. If you want to dedicate a ton of time and really one-trick a jungler, Kallari is going to be one of the best options in terms of difficulty, but when mastered, you'll have a huge impact. With the first time test and play, this is a pick that I do not want to see my jungler first timing in my game. When learning this champion for the first time, you should go into it expecting to lose a ton early. 50 games or more will be required for you to feel comfortable on this champ and for you to overcome and understand what she can and cannot do. For mid lane, we don't actually have all that many champions in the easy tier. A common theme among these picks is that they have a key spell in their kit that is very easy to use and can be extremely impactful. Take Gadget, for instance. She is a fairly safe champion with tons of range, has a bomb that travels fast and deals a lot of damage, and is almost auto-locked due to the land assist, which can allow players to focus on the lane rather than the champion. Influence on games can go into first timing these champs, and you'll actually have a pretty good shot at picking up some wins right up the bat. 10 games should be all it takes to start feeling like you can be consistently impactful. Similar to the jungle medium tier, a lot of the medium tier mid laners are a bit more mechanically demanding, but more so just require higher game knowledge to pull off compared to the easy tier champs. Faye is arguably one of the easier casters in the game, but when compared to the likes of Gadget or Gideon, she's still more difficult to pull off just to having more skill shot spells or not having an easy getaway mechanic, relying more on choosing the right openings to burst out a target. If you go in at the wrong time with Faye, you can just die without doing anything. But with easy tier champs like Gideon, even if you miss position, you're one teleport away from getting out, and this can sway a fight massively. The thought process required to play a lot of these medium tier champions is just a cut above the easy tier. The hard tier for the mid lane consists of a champion with more mechanically intensive combos with a little harder playstyle to navigate into most mid laners. A lot of these champions will require up to 50 games before you really begin seeing results. Howitzer has a lot of skill shot synergy within his kit, but it requires a good amount of time on champion to link them together. Between his rocket's hitbox or his displacement grenade placement, you'll have to learn the field due to lack of indicators. You also have a playstyle consideration like the champion Countess, who is walking to most ranged matchups with a bit of a disadvantage due to being melee, and relying on stacking a passive before gaining access to her potential. Expert tier mid laners come down to two champions that are navigating skill shots, hindered by not being allowed to miss in order to keep their damage up, with either positioning being a concern or handling melee range disadvantages. Either way, look to put a substantial amount of time on champion before you start to see reliable success. Easy tier AD carry. So relative to all other AD carries, Murdoch is the most linear and has simple non-skill shot-esque abilities for trading. He is a simple pick and can be impactful without needing incredible mechanics or positioning skills. Due to his pushback, he becomes relatively safe when he gets engaged on, having the abilities to speed up your movement in order to secure kills. In addition, he has an ultimate that can kill targets that aren't engaging him directly. So this provides a good framework for learning the role. For carries, it's going to be positioning that takes the most time to learn. Being a role with more vulnerable characters, any champion that lets you overcome bad positioning will allow you to focus more on gameplay rather than learning the champion. The medium tier for AD carry is where you get into the champs that are more auto-reliant for damage, but not necessarily more mechanically intensive. A lot of these champions have escape tools or range enhancers in their kits, which makes them more forgiving than champions found on the hard or expert tier. Even if you're not the best AD carry player, picking up a Twin Blast can help you out a lot due to the self-peel he has in his kit, and he has a lot less reliance on positioning perfectly to succeed. You don't have to be the most mechanically gifted player to win on these champs, which makes them good fits for the medium tier. Jumping into the hard tier for AD carry. This is where choosing your openings is vital. Picks like Grim with no repositioning tools in their kit means you have to always be walking that fine line of staying safe but still being able to pump out damage. It's going to take you more time to learn skill shots like his shield or even his lobbing blast, so 25 to 50 games should be your benchmark. Expert AD carries are not champions you can expect to stomp with immediately. Getting used to their wonky damage mechanic is a process. Wraith is a candidate for our first pick rule. You just never want to see teammates first pick Wraith on your team. His damage output is the most skill shot reliant and will take you at the very least 50 games to play at a decent level. But even then, hundreds of games is more realistic. Last but not least, the support role. If you want to pick someone up and near immediately have results, or if you want a good autofill champion, these are your best options. Between Grux and Narbash, both are extremely simple to grasp and be effective. Within the very first game you pick them up, Grux has very easy to hit crowd control, which makes him very, very effective, no matter how bad you are. And Narbash can heal anybody by just simply turning on a spell, so there's no way for you guys to be useless on either champion. The medium tier for support is littered with champions that can still have pretty much good success with right away, but generally have more nuanced kits that require a bit more tinkering with in order to be effective. FaZe, for example, is a bit more difficult than an enchanter like Narbash because she needs a bit more, opportunity to be carefully positioned in order to use her spells correctly. Narbash can just press a button at any random time in a team fight and get good value out of it. But FaZe's pull can be wasted if it's not used at an optimal time. You need a bit more general game knowledge to win with these medium tier supports, whereas you can kind of just face roll your way to victory with the easy tier champs. The hard tier support champions fit into one of two categories. Either both they are extremely unique in how they play the game compared to the average support, or they have more difficult kits to execute. Muriel fits into the first category of being more unique because she has zero crowd control that she can rely on in order to get a carry out of a bad situation. There's no other traditional support in the game that needs to weave auto attacks, shields, and speed boosts consistently to be effective, which makes Muriel more difficult to pick up. Picks like Richter are very reliant on hitting their skill shots to have an impact, and if they miss, they're highly ineffective. So 50 games is a realistic timetable that you should expect to have to put in before you really begin carrying on these champions. Expert tier for support consists of champions that have extreme reliance on hitting skill shots to succeed, or they have many different ways in which they can approach situations. Like Decker and Zarus are probably the worst supports in the game to play if you're first timing them, because there are just so many intricacies to each pick that cannot be learned in just a few games. That being said, the reward for mastering any of these expert tiered supports is huge. So if you're capable of being consistent and can spam well over 50 games on these champs, you will reap the benefits eventually. Alrighty guys, well that wraps up everything we got for you guys today. If you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe. Don't forget to comment some feedback on what you saw. And like always, be blessed, be positive, and be safe. And until next time, peace.